Okay, so we're going to talk about the Divided States of Hysteria, and this was a comic by Howard Chaykin, coming out from Image. This a couple years ago, and it kind of it's weird because this completely dies down and then kind of sparks up again, like a little fire that comes back to life. So what I'm going to do in this video is explain, what was the controversy, what happened, maybe try and touch on why it keeps coming up, and then ask you some questions about, is the controversy valid or not, or what? Hey everybody, this is Perch. The Divided States of Hysteria, a comic that got a lot of attention back, I believe, in 2017, published at Image, dominated some news at the time. It was written and drawn by Howard Chaykin, and it was basically, so it was a future version, relatively near future version of Washington, D.C., and it had oppressed people fighting back against their oppressors, and then the oppressors fighting back against the oppressed, and it had kind of a lot of I think, the intention was, hey, we've got a divided country or a divided world, and that this would spill over ultimately into violence and, and problems. And it's funny because in 2017 almost feels like a charming time where a lot of these things kind of have come to life. However, it featured a bunch of little kind of moments that, piqued people's interests or concerns or outrage. There was a cop killer. There was a storyline around a trans person getting, I think, attacked and then kind of getting revenge. There was a sniper, an African American or black man. I think it was not in America actually, but anyway, sniping people from a window. There was Jewish people stealing money, and then it was pretty much, it was weird from the standpoint of the comic gave you what it advertised. I think the comic was in the original cover, and a lot of the promo art had a woman in a burqa that was kind of painted in the American flag, and then future covers featured, various violence. There was one where the cover was going to portray a lynching, and then, the cover got changed. And so this a lot of things happened because of this. So number one, there were people who said this was glorifying violence, and in particular, glorifying violence to marginalized people, to trans people in particular, because there's a trans woman's who is basically portrayed as naked and beaten to death. And this got a lot of articles started to be written about the fetish nature of violence in comics, and that this comics was just using it for shock value, or to kind of fetishize violence, and in that way trivialize this kind of stuff. Now, and then for people made this connection. I don't know if this was just scheduling errors or just yet one more thing to get people pissed off. This issue came out during Pride Month, and so it was also, and then it had Image Comics Pride Month cover branding on the cover, probably something that was not known or authorized or even understood by the creator, I would guess, but who knows? So this generates a lot of anger, and a lot of people saying that this comic was deliberately kind of glorifying violence. A lot of people started to make comments that Howard Chaykin must be a big Trumper who likes this kind of stuff. I don't that argument was a little bit insane, in the sense that there's also some essays in the back that made it 1,000% clear that Howard Chaykin was not a Trump fan, and I mean, in many ways, he was extremely hardcore about how much he disliked Trump. So it would just be one more little thing zooming in here, because in 2020 everything is about Trump, really. So Chaykin semi-defended himself, saying that he meant it to be incendiary, he meant it to be cutting, and he's trying to provoke and incite conversation. The counter argument was, well, you're so removed from the people you're depicting that you have no idea whether you're actually being provocative or just hurtful. And you have to listen in order to understand. And Chaykin said he was not interested in doing that because his job was to create a comic book, and the people who were telling him that he needed to sit and listen to why it offended them, could basically go bugger off, was his perspective. So, what happened? Well, many called for a boycott of all things image. There was a bunch of kind of articles written on big sites like Polygon and others saying that this was, image must issue an apology, image must suffer as a result of this. Clearly, now we have the benefit of looking back in hindsight. None of those things actually happened. Image's sales were not hurt by any of this. The title did go nowhere. And it was kind of, I think, the very definition of a controversy that got a lot of people riled up. A lot of blog articles got written. A lot of people on Twitter were mad. And at the end of the day, it really didn't mean anything. And I say it didn't mean anything because the title never really went anywhere. I don't know if it was just canceled or just stopped. Howard Chaykin went on to do other things. Chaykin is doing work. I mean, just in the last 30 days, I think, did some work for Marvel, continues to get work in comics. Maybe, I don't think he's blacklisted anywhere. And it never really mattered. But a lot of articles were written about this comic hurts people. In fact, and to kind of take it a few steps further, I think the fourth issue, the cover was going to depict a lynching. Now, clearly that was done for some level of shock value, which is not a unknown crazy concept. It's always interesting when people do things for shock value and then somebody doesn't like it. Then there's this kind of pearl clutching. I cannot believe you would do something for shock value, but it's like, we can date that particular marketing approach. I mean, for a century, that's not new. So, but anyway, at the lynching issue, they did pull that cover. Image issues an apology, which they called a joint apology. But then Howard Chaykin comes out and says he wasn't consulted for that apology, and he has nothing to apologize for, and piss off. Anyway. And then, like I said, the Guardian writes this gentleman, Kieran Shach, I don't know but anyway, he talks about how the fact that this cover was even considered or printed indicates that the comic industry is full of too much privilege, and so where do you go with this? I don't know. I think this is one of those cases where you have a belief one way or another, and you're just going to kind of hold to that belief. Is depicting violence against a marginalized person of color, trans person, whatever it happens to be, is depicting violence in a comic book ever acceptable? For some people, the answer is a hard no. It is something that can never be done. For others, the answer is it can be done, but only if it's being written or handled by a trans creator, if it's trans violence. The rules are too weird. And frankly, what's happening is a lot of creators are just, and companies are just kind of noping out of the whole conversation, and they just don't include anything. And so here's where I'll at least roll out a question. And I admit, I don't have the answer to this. This isn't a baiting question or a question designed. It's at what point, if you're Marvel or DC or even Image, at what point do you just say, you know what, let's not do any trans characters at all in our comic books anywhere because it's too risky. We're in the business of producing, 40, 50, 60 comics a month. We're pumping them out like a conveyor belt. We can't deal with any controversy. So just, don't include any. We don't want any trans creators because if we hire the wrong one and we do it wrong, then it's going to cause us noise. We don't want any characters in there. It's just, we don't want to deal with it. I'm not saying that perspective is right by any stretch of imagination. I'm just saying pragmatically, is that where, I think that's where companies often get to. And is that a win? Like, okay, so we're not going to have any violence against people of color, but now are we having very few people, people of color characters at all? Like, is that the ultimate conclusion? I'm not saying any of this as a big throated defense of Howard Chaykin. I read the comic. I didn't think it was particularly a good comic. I felt like it was a lot of shock value stuff. That was the intention of it. It was designed to kind of provoke and generate controversy and maybe conversation. Although, like, good Lord, do you need more conversation about these topics right now? Like, Twitter's got you covered. You don't need to be producing comics in order to generate conversation on these topics. It's mission complete. It's already done. But to me, the comic was largely a non-factor. And again, with the passage of time, that's how it wound up. Comic never really went anywhere, didn't sell massive copies. It kind of is largely on the road to being forgotten. I'll bet there's people right now in 2020 that never heard of this comic and just never really thought about it. That's the ultimate result. Is that a win for one group or another, or is it just the free market just kind of deciding? With all the articles and all the attention, all the long blogs and all of the kind of anger, creators still doing work, comic never went anywhere. What does it matter? The question I would have is purely, when you have there was an article written at the time complimenting writers like Kieran Gillen, Andrew Wheeler, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Ryan North, Marjorie Bennett, Gail Simone, who have reached out to trans people as sounding boards to make sure they're not screwing anything up. I mean, good for you, I think, as a writer for reaching out to people to try and have an authentic experience in the characters you're writing. I think that's cool. But my suspicion is over time, people are just going to not bother. And they're just going to not include the content in the first place. And is that what people want? I don't know. I'm asking the questions. I'm not. To me, it feels like this was one of those controversies that I don't want to say felt invented, but it definitely felt like it got way more press and anger and articles written and everything else than the actual, popularity of the subject matter deserved or warranted. And it felt like it was. I remember writing at the time, this is something that's going to get forgotten, and it was forgotten. So, 3 years later, have things gotten better, worse, the same? Did it matter? I don't know. What about you? Did you read this comic? Did you enjoy it? How do you think violence gets handled in comics? And do you agree or disagree with my premise of, I think if this continues, you're just going to see people just opt out completely and do nothing. And is that a good outcome that we want? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Follow me on social media, send me an email. But most importantly, thanks for listening.